Our scripture reading is from Leviticus 19, 1-2 and 9-18. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say unto them, Ye shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. And when ye reap the harvest of your land, thou shalt not wholly reap the corners of thy field, neither shalt thou gather the gleanings of thy harvest. And thou shalt not glean the vineyard, neither shalt thou gather every grape of thy vineyard. Thou shalt leave them for the poor and stranger. I am the Lord your God. Ye shall not steal, neither deal falsely, neither lie one to another. And ye shall not swear by my name falsely, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. Thou shalt not defraud thy neighbor, neither rob him. The wages of him that is hired shall not abide with thee all night until the morning. Thou shalt not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind, but shalt fear thy God. I am the Lord. Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Thou shalt not respect the person of the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty, but in righteousness shalt thou judge thy neighbor. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people, neither shalt thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Lord. Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, and not suffer sin upon him. Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. Our next reading is from Matthew 5, 38-48. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor, and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you, and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect.
I think I mentioned once before that the Sermon on the Mount, now there's thought that the Sermon on the Mount wasn't in fact one continuous thing, but it was the writer of the Gospel of Matthew assembling various sayings of Jesus into one big continuous thing. So the likelihood of it being one sort of long sermon that Jesus kind of sat there, people sat there and listened patiently, maybe not. But even so, I have some concern about that, because the way Matthew reports it, they all sat there patiently and listened to Jesus talk. And talk and talk and talk. And he said lots of really important things. In fact, so many important things that we break it down into little pieces so we can talk about it each week and examine each piece. And Matthew records it as one long continuous thing. So I was just having a moment there a moment ago, because I didn't have a copy of the hymn book. I didn't have a copy of More Voices up here. I was wandering around. I actually wandered around trying to find one. I couldn't find one, by the way, so if anybody's got a spare. And you would be surprised at how people, when you're the minister, during the service, and you wander out into the congregation, you would, bless you. Thank you. You'd be surprised how people greet you. With this kind of, what are you doing here? Right? It's kind of, because let's be fair. What are you doing here? Because I'm not supposed to be over there or back there. I'm supposed to be up here. And you're supposed to sit there and listen to me every single word. That's how it works, isn't it? I mean, even more contemporary churches where you might sit in a circle, or you might have chairs instead of pews, or whatever it is, the way this part of the service works is you sit there and listen to me talk at you. I have a dream. I know I've had several, but I have a dream that one day, in the middle of a sermon, someone will stand up and say, I don't agree with what you're saying, and here's why, and we'll have this nice little meaningful dialogue in the middle of the sermon. Okay, because I think that's what happened. I don't think Jesus sat there and kept talking, and everyone sat there patiently going, oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, that's good. Think about the first pieces of we've heard in 4 pieces now, I think, 4 pieces, the beginning, just the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And that's included Jesus saying, blessed are you, all of you, and the various ways in which you're blessed. That's good, that's all good. I imagine people were kind of sitting there going, wow, oh, that's nice. Yeah, thanks, Jesus. That's great. The great stuff. And then he moved on to other things, right? And as he moved on to each of those things, I think those people who were sitting there kind of started to get more progressively kind of, what are you saying? Pardon? In fact, it didn't even have to be one continuous Sermon on the Mount. It could have been over a period of time where he talked to different people. But especially today, do you think that people actually sat there and listened to Jesus say, love your enemy? And by the way, that however many centuries of believing in the law of retribution, ignore that and just love your enemy. And if somebody takes things from you, just keep giving them more stuff. Do you think people sat there and went, okay, that sounds like a fine idea? Or was there some pushback that maybe the writer of the gospel didn't record? Or did people start to get up and walk away? And go, are you kidding? That first bit was nice, but that stuff after it about the law, no. And, oh, I can't believe you just said, did you just say, I can't believe it, and walked away. I know that there's some things that I even said this last week that we have to remember that the first century Jesus is talking to first century Hebrews. But even the first century Jesus talking to 21st century Christians who've had 2,000 years of following Jesus, surely you are sitting there and going, that's a nice sentiment, but how do you make that work? Don't you? The other doesn't work either. We're going to have to talk after. Interrupting me in the middle of it. No, I'm kidding. But that's the thing, is that here is Jesus, and we even start to refer to them, and I did refer to them as the sayings. These are things that Jesus says. Do you think he left it at that and walked away? Or do you think he sat there? I think whether you remember it as the Sermon on the Mount or the various sermons in different places, I think Jesus sat there and talked to people. Because I don't think they learned instantly from someone standing in front of them and saying in 3 sentences, you should love your neighbor. You should also love your enemy. And by the way, that whole thing about justice is about retribution for a crime, forget that. Love instead. Right, now off you go. We're done. I don't think he did that. I think Jesus talked to people about what he meant. I think he tried to explain a little bit more, and I think he needed to, because I think people responded to what he said. I don't think they just sat there and went, oh yeah, that's nice, and went off and did it, or worse, sat there and said, wow, that's nice, and then didn't go and do it. In fact, that's actually the worst one. Walking away and saying that's not going to work is even better than, yeah, that sounds nice, and then not doing it, because then you'd be who? You'd be just like the Pharisees that he complains about all the time, right? They're the ones who talk a good talk, but they don't ever do it. See, I think Jesus talked to people and he engaged them. I wonder if the person who wrote the gospel didn't actually intentionally, though, frame it as sayings so that you'd have to listen to me. And by me, I don't mean specifically me, 2,000 years later. I mean, you would have to listen to whoever was the leader of the church at the time. And I would tell you, what it means, and then you'd know. Right? What do you think it means? Would be my question. I can't imagine Jesus sat there and went, this is how it should go, off you go. I think he waited for the pushback. I think he waited for people to say, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Somebody takes stuff from me. You're saying I shouldn't get to take back from them, and not only what was mine, but punish them appropriately. You're saying I should just give them more stuff. Yes. But why? And that's the point where I kind of wish it was a Sermon on the Mount, like one continuous thing, because that's a moment at which I think Jesus would go, were you not listening? Did you not listen to me talk about how we're all blessed no matter where we are in our lives? Did you not listen to me say, you are like salt for the earth and light to enlighten the world? Did you not hear me say, the point of the law isn't the word, but what is at its heart? And at the heart of the law is that we should all love each other and be in a really good relationship with each other and create community with each other. If all of those things are happening, and you agree with me so far, don't you think the next logical step would be love everyone? If you are living love, how could you possibly hate an enemy? You must love them because you are living love in your life. So here's the first thing about this piece of the Sermon on the Mount, is that I hear this first piece of the Sermon on the Mount, and I hate this piece of the Sermon on the Mount, just like you, for the same reason. It's hard. That first bit, Jesus, the blessing thing, that was easy. Oh, okay, I get these salt and thing, that's okay. And living at the heart of, okay, I understand it. That's a little bit more challenging, but I get that. This bit's hard. It's crunch time now, and if you're really living love, this is the hard part. And to top it all off, and you know what? It doesn't matter which translation, which version of this part of the Bible, this piece of the story you hear, it doesn't matter. Each one ends with Jesus saying, you must be perfect. That's the word. Perfect as God is perfect. Whoa, what? This is the moment at which the writer of the Gospel of Matthew did a really clever thing, and let me explain it to you. Because perfect isn't the word, telos, I think is the word that's there, isn't about being perfect, it's about being whole. Our idea of perfect, much like our idea of enemy, which I'm coming to in just a second, our idea of perfect is something very different. But Jesus' idea of perfect is whole. You must be whole. In order to be whole, you must live love in your life. That's what makes you whole. Love with each other, love for yourself, love for God. I think I got that in the reverse order, but you know what I mean. That's what makes you whole. That's Jesus' idea of perfect. Let's go back to the enemy thing. You know where our word enemy comes from? Picture your enemy in your mind. Now, I imagine those are a lot of different enemies. Nope, I'm not saying his name. But I imagine, but you knew who I meant, didn't you? Actually, I was thinking Snidely Whiplash. Remember Dudley Do-Right, right? In the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, his enemy was Snidely Whiplash, the guy with the mustache, the big black hat, and he was the quintessential arch villain, right? And in fact, I even made it be what we think enemies are. Enemies aren't just people that stand against us, they're villains. They're bad. We're good, they're bad. We imbue that word with a whole pile of stuff that it isn't. And we do that because the origin of the word enemy actually comes from inimicus, which is a Latin word that means not friend. That's all it means, not friend. So let's say this a little differently then. Love your friends and love your not friends. That sounds like it's easier, isn't it? Of course it does. But then we start using the word enemy, and enemy is something different. Enemy is about something or someone that's evil, that stands against you. Time is my enemy. It surely is. It absolutely is. I'm late lots. I never have enough time to do stuff, and that's why I'm usually late, is I always think I have more time to do stuff, and then it turns out I don't. And then it turns out it's like the next week after I was supposed to have done it, or it turns out to be, years after I was supposed to have done it. Time is my enemy. And I think that because I don't think time just passes quickly. I think it does it on purpose. I think time is out to get me. That's why time's my enemy. All right, you're laughing now, but all of you people who think the weather changes because you're having a barbecue, right? Or suddenly it snows on that football game you were going to. The weather. You made the weather your enemy. You didn't just say it was something that stands against you. You made it bad. That's what we do with that word. But why do we do that? Why do we make them evil? Is it just because they disagree with us? Or is it because we think and assume there's more to that person than just that? Do we put on that person a whole bunch of other stuff? Laura and I were having a really interesting conversation the other day about, we were talking about other people that we know who think Donald Trump's great. And the point, sorry, I didn't mean to say his name. But the point of the discussion, though, was that Lori was saying that she realized in talking to this person, who she loves very much and is a very reasonable person and just a good person, that they're entitled to their opinion. And their opinion is based on the sources of information that they go to. And we go to sources of information that we like. We go to the comfy chair for our source of information. And if that's where you go, because it fits in with what you think, that's the information you'll acquire. And if you think about how that applies to, well, everyone, then people that you consider your enemy because their politics are different are simply not your friend. They're not bad. They're not evil. Has anybody in the room actually met him in person? Then you don't know, do you? I don't. Oh boy, we don't like knowing that, do we? We don't like knowing that. We like to make the assumptions and leap to the conclusions that we do because we heard this from so-and-so, or we heard this from so-and-so, or we happen to somehow watch Fox News, or we heard it from some source or other, so it must be true. How do you know? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's anything but fake about the news. I'm not. That's somebody else's gig. But the thing is, we go to the sources of information that meet where we are already. And so we can very easily, as human beings, fall into that trap of assuming that we know. And instantly, someone who was just, well, not a friend, is now an enemy. And then we load up, on top of that, think about, for instance, when we go to war. We have enemies. Of course, because we have enemies, we can now load up that word with a whole bunch of stuff. Because I want you on my side. And I want you to want to fight this enemy. So now I'm going to tell you more, so that you'll want to. So that you're literally driven to want to fight the enemy. You have now totally lost all respect for them as human beings. In fact, you probably don't think of them as human beings because I've driven you to the point where they're not a human, they're an enemy. But that's not what an enemy is. An enemy is simply someone who started out as not friend. You learned to make them an enemy. We learn that. And we learn it, sometimes we learn it from experiences that we feel are right. Sometimes we learn it from experiences that aren't. but we learn it. Nelson Mandela famously, and I'm absolutely paraphrasing, but famously said that we're not born to hate. We learn it. We learn to hate. I would have added to that and said, I think our default setting, we are born in love. That's our birth setting. Think about it, we're made in the image of God. If we believe that, we must be made in the image of love at birth. We learn something else. And Mandela says, we learn to hate. If we can learn to hate, then surely we can learn to love. It is the experience that we have. It's the manner in which we engage people. It's the relationships we either develop or we don't develop, and how we develop them. And here's Jesus saying, love your enemy. Loving your friends is easy. Love your enemy. Here's Jesus saying, love that person who is not your friend. Love those persons who are not your friends. Love your enemy. That's so hard because, you do that and then they just kick you again and again and again. Or you show love to your enemy and what do you lose? Well, you win. You mean nothing. You lose is what happens. You lose. But Jesus didn't say love your enemy because it will change them. He says love your enemy because it changes you. That's the point. Jesus spending his life showing us how we should love and then saying, go and love one another as I have loved you. That means your friends, your enemies. That means everyone, everything. Go and love. That isn't because it's going to change their world. It's going to change yours. When you live love, it changes your world. It may change others as well. It will change others as well. There's no doubt in some way or another it will change other lives. But when Jesus says you should love your neighbor and your enemy, and you should not want to strike back at somebody and call it justice. When Jesus says that, he's not trying to save that other person. He's trying to save you. It's about changing your world. And when your world changes, you start to change other people's worlds too, because you start to do what Jesus does. Shows people. Jesus didn't just say, love your enemy and walk away. Jesus said, love your enemy, and then tried to show you, to show us how to do that. That changed the world. Imagine how the world could be changed if you changed your world and loved your enemies. Imagine that world.